Cameras have now recorded enormous Burmese pythons moving beyond the swamps and creeping directly into Florida's residential areas. This is the exact moment scientists warned about, the point when the python invasion passed the boundary everyone assumed would protect us. Right now, an entire food chain is breaking apart before our eyes, and Florida is rapidly losing the chance to slow the spread. Researchers believe we are standing at the edge of a full-scale ecosystem breakdown, starting from the smallest species and rising upward. Nightmare on the border. The footage was captured by a high-resolution drone, quietly floating above the hot, damp tree-line, while its thermal camera peers through the thick cypress cover below. What it exposed was the exact moment Florida's most frightening environmental disaster finally crossed a critical boundary. The drone was scanning the drainage network of a suburban neighborhood along the swamp's northern edge. There, burning bright orange against the cool, dark screen, appeared the unmistakable heat signature of a massive 16-foot Burmese python, tightly coiled and lying in wait. This footage confirms that the invasion has now reached our front door. But when biologists studied the video more closely, it wasn't just the size of the snake that terrified them. It was where it was found. The python wasn't hidden deep in sawgrass. It wasn't tucked away in a distant section of protected land visited only by experts. Instead, it sat near a water outlet leading straight into neatly trimmed lawns, backyard play areas, dog walking routes, and long rows of suburban homes. This is precisely what scientists warned would happen decades ago, the slow shift from wild swamps into everyday neighborhoods. This spread did not happen suddenly. Pythons expanded away and spread through water, slow at first, almost invisible, then impossible to stop. By the time the public fully recognized the danger, these snakes had already claimed thousands of square miles. Encounters near neighborhoods were once shocking and rare. Today, drones record them on a regular basis. Yet the most disturbing sign of the invasion isn't something we can see. It's something we no longer hear. Bioacoustic scientists have analyzed thousands of hours of sound recordings collected from remote listening stations. What they uncovered was a complete collapse of the natural soundscape. The familiar nighttime calls of native small mammals have vanished. In areas heavily occupied by pythons, researchers measured as much as a 90% drop in these sound frequencies. For scientists who have spent their entire career studying the Everglades, this silence is deeply unsettling. It signals that the mammals are gone, eaten faster than they can reproduce. This silence is the audio evidence of an ecosystem in free fall. People living along the Everglades boundary are already seeing strange changes. Pets disappear without explanation. Lawns show wide, dragging marks press into the grass. Water in backyard canals behaves unpredictably. Raccoon populations have fallen so drastically that some residents say they haven't seen one in months. Police and wildlife agencies are now receiving calls they never imagined handling. Not just reports, but doorbell camera clips of pythons sliding across driveways in the middle of the night. Footage of enormous snakes disappearing beneath porch steps. The nightmare is no longer confined to the swamp. It is unfolding in residential streets. And the cameras are showing just how close the threat truly is. And if this is what we can see today, the only question that remains is what happens next as the invasion line continues to push forward. The biological time bomb. To fully understand today's nightmare, we have to go back to the moment the very first snake slipped into the wild. Burmese pythons, originally from Southeast Asia, arrived in Florida through a dangerous mix of the exotic pet trade and human carelessness. By the 1990s, they had already established breeding populations and were overpowering prey much larger than themselves. The breaking point came with Hurricane Andrew in 1992. The storm destroyed private collections and facilities, releasing countless exotic animals into the environment and transforming a manageable issue into an uncontrollable biological time bomb. But that headline moment hides a much longer story. This invasion was built slowly, through years of small mistakes, escapes, and poor decisions that piled up over time. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Burmese pythons became one of the most popular large snakes sold in the United States. They were marketed as harmless babies, often no longer than a foot. Within a year, those same snakes grew to 6 feet. By year 2, many stretched past 10 feet. Owners who were unprepared or overwhelmed began releasing them into canals, wooded areas, and even neighborhood parks. Some releases were deliberate, others accidental, and some happened when owners moved or storms damaged enclosures. Hurricane Andrew took these scattered introductions and spread them all at once. Breeding centers and private exotic animal facilities across South Florida were completely destroyed. Hundreds of snakes vanished into the wreckage and then into the swamp, where warm waters and thick vegetation made survival and concealment easy. And because the Everglades never experienced winters cold enough to kill them, the snakes didn't just survive, they flourished. In the early years, scientists underestimated the true scale of the problem because Burmese pythons are exceptionally hard to detect. Their patterns blend perfectly into their surroundings. Even experienced researchers can pass within inches of one without noticing it. These snakes hide underwater, beneath roots under leaves, and inside drainage systems. For every python spotted by a hiker or hunter, thousands more remain unseen. That is why wildlife biologists often repeat the same warning. If you see one python, there are already too many. And now, the future threat goes far beyond simple population size. The strongest force driving this invasion forward is climate change. As Florida's average temperatures rise, regions that were once too cold for pythons to survive winter conditions, the natural barrier limiting their spread, are becoming warm enough for them to live year-round. Northern Florida, southern Georgia, and even part of Alabama and Mississippi are now experiencing winters that no longer reach lethal cold levels. This opens vast new territory, allowing the snakes to move steadily north. Rising temperatures also affect reproduction. Warmer conditions increase metabolism, raise the number of successful egg clutches, and help females recover faster between breeding cycles. A single female python can already lay up to 100 eggs. Warmer years only make those numbers more dangerous. As alarming as that is, there is an even darker layer to the story, known as the super python. Scientific evidence shows that Burmese pythons are capable of hybridizing with African rock pythons. African rock pythons are known for their strength, aggression, and ability to survive in cooler climates. They were also introduced to Florida decades ago through the pet trade, though in much smaller numbers. Even a limited population becomes a serious threat when hybridization is possible. Genetic testing has confirmed that some captured snakes carry traits from both species. These hybrids grow large, adapt quickly, and may handle colder conditions better than either parent. Over multiple generations, this pushes a population toward increased cold tolerance, stronger immune systems, and faster growth. With every mile the snakes expand, their ecological impact grows wider. This is why wildlife officials say the python invasion today is no longer the same one that began in the 1990s. It is changing and adapting. The idea of a super python isn't science fiction. It is simply biology combined with time and pressure, the same forces that shaped every apex predator on the planet. Florida has become the perfect testing ground for rapid evolution. If nothing disrupts this path, these snakes could eventually dominate wetland ecosystems across several states. And once an apex predator with no natural enemies becomes established, removing it is nearly impossible. The biological time bomb that started with a single escaped snake is still counting down. But now, the clock is moving faster, and the coming impact could reshape not only Florida, but entire ecosystems across the southeastern United States. Ecosystem failure. The python invasion is not just about animals disappearing. It marks the breakdown of the entire food web from the ground up, slowly starving Florida's own top predators. The Florida panther, one of the most endangered big cats on Earth, is now facing a new and dangerous threat driven by pythons. These panthers depend on prey such as deer fawns, feral hogs, and raccoons to survive. As pythons wipe out the same small and medium-sized mammals, panthers are pushed into direct competition over a rapidly shrinking food supply. This growing shortage leads to increased territorial clashes, a well-documented result when a predator's main source of food begins to vanish. Scientists in South Florida have started noticing troubling changes in panther behavior. Data from GPS collars shows the cats traveling longer distances and using more energy just to find prey. Normally, panthers spend much of the day resting to save energy for nighttime hunts. Now, many are moving for hours without success. When a top predator uses more energy than it gains, survival becomes uncertain. Wildlife officials are also reporting more panthers appearing near residential areas and even crossing busy highways during the day. Each sighting tells the same story. Hunger is driving them closer to danger. Florida already loses several panthers every year to vehicle collisions. As their prey disappears, that danger increases sharply. What makes this crisis especially destructive is how quietly pythons remove prey. They swallow animals whole, digest them completely, and move on. A panther hunting in the swamp cannot detect what has already been eaten. The landscape simply feels empty. But the damage does not end with the panther. When small mammals disappear, plant life begins to shift. Marsh rabbits and rodents naturally graze on vegetation and spread seeds as they move. Without them, certain plants grow unchecked, clogging waterways and disrupting the natural flow of water. Burrowing animals like armadillos and rabbits also loosen soil and create small habitats for insects, birds, and amphibians. Without these natural engineers, the ground becomes compacted and less alive. That subtle change leads to major consequences. Compacted soil absorbs and releases water differently. In some areas, it drains too quickly, while in others, it traps water. In the Everglades, where water movement controls everything, even minor soil changes can alter the entire system. This leads directly to the next crisis quietly building beneath the surface, the water crisis. The inland spread of pythons is now fueling a coastal water disaster. As burrowing and grazing mammals disappear, the swamp's hydrology shifts. Soil compaction reduces aeration and changes how water flows through the land. This altered drainage increases both the speed and volume of polluted freshwater runoff from agricultural regions north of the Everglades. For years, agriculture alone was blamed for toxic blooms, and it remains a major contributor. But ecologists now warn that the collapse of the Everglades food web makes these blooms worse by changing how and when runoff reaches a coast. It is like removing a sponge from a wet surface. Water that once moved slowly and filtered naturally now rushes outward, carrying chemicals straight to the ocean. The result is visible along Florida's once clear coastlines, now stained green and red. Communities near estuaries report longer and more intense bloom seasons. Dead fish pile up on beaches, and the damage spreads mile after mile. This has become both an environmental and economic crisis, stretching across hundreds of miles of coastline. To make matters worse, the destabilized, snake-dominated habitat has opened the door for other invasive species. Animals like the black and white tego lizard are moving in, accelerating the ecosystem's collapse. Florida's native reptiles are now caught in a chain reaction of losses triggered by species that never belonged there. The water crisis, the predator crisis, and the collapse of the ecosystem are not separate events. They are all connected parts of the same unraveling system. Each one shows how a single invasive predator can reshape an entire landscape far beyond its original home. Tipping point. The footage coming out of Florida's swamps, the thermal images, the silent audio recordings, and the visual proof of animals vanishing serves as a powerful warning. But something else is happening that scientists did not expect to see this soon. Nature is beginning to respond in small but meaningful ways, offering researchers a measure of hope. Against the odds, native predators like the American alligator and large birds of prey have started attacking younger pythons. In the early years, this almost never happened. Pythons grew too quickly and reached sizes that few predators could challenge. But constant pressure, repeated encounters, and shared territory have begun to change that balance. Young snakes that remain exposed are now more likely to be spotted by alligators or hawks. Some have been recorded being dragged beneath the water. Others have been lifted from trees by eagles. These moments do not reverse the damage, but they show the ecosystem attempting to adapt to a new threat. Scientists believe this natural resistance could strengthen over time. If alligators continue preying on juvenile pythons, they may slow population growth in certain regions. This would not eliminate the snakes, but it could give some native species a chance to recover. Still, this natural pushback is only one piece of the solution. The larger effort comes from people determined not to let the Everglades collapse. Human intervention is now stronger than ever. The Judas Mail program is expanding. Drones are scanning wider areas. Nighttime surveys are detecting snakes that once moved completely unnoticed. Every year, more advanced tools are deployed in the field. These technologies allow humans to observe the Everglades the same way snakes do, by tracking heat movement and shadow. Habitat restoration also plays a role. When small mammals disappear, the landscape changes with them. In response, teams are working to protect soil, manage water flow, and rebuild areas damaged by ecological imbalance. Progress is slow, but these efforts are essential. Even with all of this work, Florida's wetlands remain at a critical tipping point. The next few years will determine the outcome. If python numbers continue to rise, the silence spreading through the swamp will move farther north. What happens next depends entirely on human choices. Continued investment in removal programs could slow the invasion. A successful genetic solution could reduce the population. If natural predators keep adapting, the ecosystem may regain a fragile balance. There is no single fix, only a long struggle that requires commitment and patience. As long as that effort continues, There's still hope that Florida can survive a nightmare it never chose.